He was everything Hollywood wanted in a man: blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a jawline sculpted by the gods. Troy Donahue wasn't just a teen idol, he was the blueprint for what America thought was perfect. Warner Brothers knew exactly what they were doing. They gave him a new name, airbrushed his past, and launched him like a missile into fame. Within months, his face was on every magazine. Girls plastered his posters on their bedroom walls. Boys hated how easily he turned heads. And the media? They called him the next big thing, a heartthrob so clean-cut he could have sold toothpaste. But here's the truth that no one dared to whisper at the time. The image was fake. Behind those dreamy stares and golden boy smiles was a young man already drowning in pressure, in secrets, and in a system built on lies. Hollywood wasn't building him up for success, it was setting him up for collapse. And no one, not his fans, not even Troy himself, saw the storm that was coming. He was told what to wear, how to speak, who to date, and who not to be. Because if people knew the truth, it would all come crashing down. From 1959 to the mid-60s, Troy Donahue was everywhere. He wasn't just acting in films, he was America's boyfriend. In A Summer Place, his on-screen romance with Sandra Dee became so iconic, it changed teen dramas forever. It wasn't just a movie, it was a movement. And yet, Troy was miserable. He played the sensitive, perfect guy in every single film. Clean, wholesome, ideal, the kind of man who brought flowers to your mom and kissed you on the cheek. But in real life, Troy wasn't that guy, not even close. He was tortured, stuck in a role he couldn't escape from, both on screen and off. Studios controlled his every move, and the second he tried to grow or change or push back, they shut him down. "You're not here to act," one executive allegedly told him. "You're here to be looked at." Troy knew what was happening. He was being used, packaged, and sold like a product. And the worst part? It worked. He got fan mail by the truckload, more than nearly any actor in Hollywood. He was constantly booked, but never free. Meanwhile, behind the closed doors of Hollywood mansions and studio backlots, scandals were already brewing. Troy was hiding a side of himself that the world wasn't ready to see. Relationships he couldn't talk about, feelings he had to bury, and a growing sense that his real identity would cost him everything. "I lived in fear every single day," he later admitted. "If people knew who I really was, I would have lost everything overnight." At first, no one noticed the cracks. Troy was still smiling on magazine covers, still walking red carpets. But behind the scenes, the scripts were drying up and the phone wasn't ringing anymore. Why? Because Hollywood had changed. The clean-cut, soft-spoken golden boy was now out of fashion. Audiences wanted grit, anti-heroes, men with rage in their eyes and scars on their soul. Troy didn't fit that mold. He was too perfect, too polished, too 1960s. And in Hollywood, once you're no longer useful, you become invisible. By the early 70s, the golden boy of Warner Brothers was broken, and spiraling. He wasn't turning down roles, he wasn't being offered any. He went from movie star to tabloid afterthought in a matter of years. And then it got darker. He started drinking, not socially, desperately. Rumors began to swirl about public outbursts, broken relationships, and bar fights. Some said they saw him wandering the streets. Others claimed he was living out of his car. That wasn't a rumor. It was real. The same man who once had producers begging for his time was now sleeping behind the wheel of a beat-up vehicle, parked on side streets, hoping not to be recognized. It was Hollywood's ugliest truth. The industry that built him had no problem throwing him away. Most people don't come back from what Troy went through. Fame, addiction, public humiliation, financial ruin, any one of those is enough to take someone down for good. But somehow, he didn't disappear. Troy did something Hollywood doesn't prepare you for. He got real. He stopped pretending, stopped smiling for cameras that weren't there. He walked into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and said what no studio executive ever let him say on camera. My name is Troy, and I'm an alcoholic." And from that moment on, everything changed. He didn't hide his past, he owned it. He told stories about his worst days, the drinking, the failed marriages, the homelessness. People expected shame. Instead, they got honesty. And strangely, that honesty made people love him again. Not because he was a perfect star, but because he was real, a flawed, raw survivor. The fans who once saw him as a poster boy now saw him as human, and for the first time, he was more than an image. Troy slowly returned to the screen. Not in blockbusters, but in TV guest roles, cameos, even parodies of his old self. He laughed at the past because he had finally made peace with it. He wasn't trying to be the man on the magazine anymore. He was just trying to be himself. Here's the part of the story that almost no one knew while Troy Donahue was alive. He was hiding something massive, something career-ending. Behind the image of the all-American heartthrob was a man living a double life, a life Hollywood forced him to keep buried. In private, Troy was romantically involved with other men, but this was the 1950s. And back then, one rumor, one slip, one wrong look, and you were finished. He wasn't just hiding from the public, he was hiding from the studios, the press, even his own co-stars. In secret interviews conducted decades later, Troy confessed that he had shared passionate, emotional, and entirely hidden relationships with some of the biggest male stars of the era. The most intense? Anthony Perkins. Yes, that Anthony Perkins. The legendary actor behind Norman Bates in Psycho. We could never be seen together. We had to pretend. Always pretend, Troy said. Their connection was deep, complicated, and completely off the radar. They'd meet in secret, at friends' houses, or far from the city, sitting in cars by the ocean, just to feel free for a moment. There was no Instagram, no texts, just quiet, stolen moments between two men who understood what it meant to live in fear. He understood what it was like to wear a mask, Troy whispered in one of his final interviews. We didn't fall in love like normal people. We fell in love in the shadows. And it wasn't just Perkins. Another name Troy dropped carefully, almost reverently, was Rock Hudson. On screen, Hudson was the definition of rugged masculinity, square jaw, deep voice, the guy every woman wanted. But off-screen, he was just as scared as Troy. Troy never confirmed a full relationship with Rock Hudson, but the way he spoke about him said everything. There were moments, Troy said, quiet, fleeting moments, where we shared something no one else could see. These weren't flings, they were bonds built on mutual silence, on fear, on knowing that if anyone found out, their careers would be over in an instant. And let's not forget what the stakes were. These men weren't just risking a bad headline or losing a few fans. They were risking their entire identities, their livelihoods, and in some cases, even their lives. Troy wasn't outing anyone. He was unburdening himself, finally releasing decades of pain bottled up by a system that punished authenticity and rewarded the mask. We were everything America dreamed of, he said, and we were terrified of losing it all. His stories weren't told for shock value. They were shared to show just how brutal the industry once was. Hollywood didn't just hide the truth, it destroyed people to protect the illusion. By the end of his life, Troy Donahue wasn't chasing fame anymore. He wasn't trying to be the poster boy. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He had lived that lie, and it had nearly killed him. What he wanted now was peace, truth, and real connection. And in the most unexpected way, he found it. In his final years, Troy formed a quiet, meaningful relationship with Zheng Chao, an opera singer whose voice could silence a room. They weren't married, they weren't on magazine covers, but those closest to him said she gave him what no one else ever had: stability, safety, and real love. And just when it seemed like his story couldn't surprise anyone anymore, it did. He discovered he had a son. A child he never knew about, born from a brief relationship in 1969. His name was Sean. They met when Sean was already an adult, and that meeting, late, unexpected, imperfect, meant everything to Troy. "For once, I felt like I left something good behind," he reportedly said. After all the wreckage, he finally felt like a father. Then, in 2001, came the final act. A heart attack. Then another. Surgery. And finally, silence. Troy Donahue died at 65. Sober, reflective, and surrounded by people who loved him. Not because he was famous, but because he was real. He was more than a heartthrob, more than a headline, more than the golden boy Hollywood sold us. Troy Donahue was a man who lived through the lie, and had the courage to tell the truth. He exposed the price of perfection, the cruelty of the spotlight, the fear of being your true self in a world that demands you fake it. And somehow, through addiction, rejection, heartbreak, and scandal, he survived. His legacy isn't just about being beautiful. It's about being brave. So the next time you see his face on an old movie poster or hear that haunting melody from A Summer Place, remember the man behind the myth, not the fantasy, but the fighter.